Yesterday, I appeared on the 90 Feet from Home podcast, and we talked about surprising pitchers so far. We're going to do the same in a return podcast with Joe Orrico today. 10/12 surprising hitters next on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast. I'm Jeff Erickson. This podcast, as always, is brought to you by the good folks at So Rare and at Prize Picks. I'm here with Joe Orrico, who hosts the 90 Feet from Home podcast, also writes on Fantasy Pros. Joe, welcome. How you doing?
Jeff, it's been a long time. It's great to talk with you again. Always a great pleasure to be on RotoWire and to chat with you. So it's going to be a fun time today doing the reverse of what we did yesterday, talking position players as opposed to pitchers.
Exactly. And I always think that it's tougher to find the breakout hitters. I think with the pitcher side of things, often we find, some indicators that suggest something is coming. We still find our surprises. We also can find pitchers that maybe going through a bit of a fluke, and we kind of benefit from that. Whereas on the hitting side, they are what they are with, at least I feel that way, though this year's results maybe say otherwise there. So I think it's a little trickier sometimes to find them.
I find it a lot harder to analyze batters than it is to analyze pitchers. I find that it's a lot easier to identify the breakouts, at least for myself. When it comes to these hot streaks and identifying them, there's a few players we're going to talk about today. David Fry in particular. It's like, how can you expect something like that to happen? How do you predict something like that? So it is very tricky, but it makes it all fun. It makes it all very fun.
Exactly. And if you land on one of those guys, all the better. We're going to start off near the top. This is the first hitter that we're going to talk about. Marcell Ozuna is not someone that we're shocked that he's hitting well. It's the degree to which he's hitting well. Hitting 308, 16 homers, 49 RBI, 31 runs scored. No stolen bases, of course. No play in the outfield, of course. So he is a UT only, which probably downgraded him a little bit, or maybe even a lot bit at the draft table. How sustainable is this?
I think it's pretty sustainable. I mean, I know that was the reason I didn't land on him a lot, was because of the utility thing, which I told myself I wasn't going to really buy into. And then, of course, it still just kind of stops you because you don't want to clog up the spot. But when you're clogging it up with first-round production, I think you're going to be doing all right. I don't know exactly how sustainable it is. The Braves lineup as a whole hasn't even been operating at full speed, and he's still been able to do this. Once Austin Riley gets going, Mike Harris, Matt Olson, these guys haven't been at 100% in terms of their usual production. Now, losing Acuna is obviously not going to help there, but I think it's fairly sustainable. Now, I wouldn't extrapolate the RBI total. I don't think he's going to get 150. I think we're probably looking at about 100 ribbies, probably a very similar season to what he did last year. Maybe the batting average comes down a little bit. He's running a bit hot on the BABIP side, but I think we can see Marcell Ozuna finish easily as a top 50 player this year. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
If you're drafting today, how early does he go? How early are you willing to take him? And we'll speculate. Let's go 12-team draft.
I would say probably somewhere in the fourth round, somewhere in the late 30s to 40s type of number overall, I think. What about you?
I think 12-teamer, I think that sounds about right. Ironically, I think the deeper the draft, the more willing I am to take an earlier shot on him, because it's just hard enough to find full-time playing time anywhere. The roster flexibility does hurt. You do feel that in any format, but I feel like you're going to have holes in 15-teamers almost everywhere, whereas maybe in a 12, maybe you don't. But you do find that your hands are tied sometimes. I do have an Ozuna league, and I do find it's like, it's a draft champions league, and it is a 15-teamer, and I just drafted poorly enough in my depth at other positions that I'm having some issues. I can't put him in the outfield, for instance, although I think my problems aren't in the outfield, they're in infield positions. But nonetheless, it is difficult sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah. And, I'm just thinking about it. I might even push him up a little bit higher just because, like we talked about yesterday, like we'll talk about today, offense has been pretty hard to come by. So when you have somebody who is a pretty surefire 35, 40 homers in a very good lineup, I don't know. I think he may end up even going a little bit higher. Maybe he does crack the top 30 if we are drafting today. I wonder too, and this is probably not going to happen. I know they signed Laureano yesterday, but do you think maybe he gets a couple games in the outfield and maybe he squeaks in outfield eligibility next year? Or is that a crazy notion? I think it might be crazy, but
I don't think he does. I think as an outfielder, he's a very good DH. I think he's one of those guys. It's just like, no, don't even push it. We've seen him in the outfield, and it hasn't been pretty. He played 2 games there last year. He hasn't even touched it this year, despite some of their issues. So I'm guessing no, but we'll see. Maybe. I mean, I think it would take both Kelnick and Duvall to really struggle before they'd be willing to do that. And I think they're more inclined to go trade for an outfielder, or like they signed Laureano. I remember the year they won when Acuna was hurt again. They traded for Duvall, they traded for Soler, they traded for Rosario. That's the way they wanted to go improve the outfield that year.
Yeah, I made a joke yesterday that Laureano is probably going to win the Series MVP this year, with the way their outfielders tend to work. And I'm guessing that there is probably another move coming still. I've heard Tommy Pham's name thrown out there, so maybe somebody else does come in. I don't think Ozuna will get in there, but if you are talking like a Yahoo league, I think he might actually have outfield eligibility there for whatever reason. Maybe I'm crazy, but I do think Ozuna is outfield eligible. So you're really taking advantage of that if you're playing over there. I'm not sure about the CBSs and everywhere else, but that's pretty damn useful.
Jeff Biddle chimes in, says Ozuna may be drafted where JD Martinez used to go. I think that's pretty valid. Below Poppy, but above JD or around JD. Because I would say Poppy went before JD Martinez, right? More often than not, at least at their peaks.
I think so. Hard to remember now. I believe so.
Yeah, I got to remember my age here, relatively speaking, to it. Yeah, and where Evil Zilla says where you draft Shohei in the first round means that Ozuna's worth a third round pick. Yeah, obviously you can't get both of them. That's one of the problems. But yeah, that makes sense. For a long time we went without too many UT onlys that we had to draft, like David Ortiz. In many cases. In the last couple of years, we haven't had too many UT onlys that we've been so excited to draft, but there was a good stretch where we, especially in the American League, we had some years where there's a lot of good DH only types. So it's a little bit different there. Let's move on to the next guy. Jurickson Profar was undrafted in many leagues. According to our RotoWire's earned auction value tool, he's a top 20 hitter this year, hitting 323, 8 homers, 35 RBI, 3 stolen bases, and 33 runs. In a San Diego lineup that we didn't think was going to be very good, in a ballpark that's usually not that friendly. What do you make out of this 2-month start for Jurickson Profar?
This feels like I'm back in high school, and it's been 12 years ago or something, and Profar is having all that hype because he was the number one prospect in baseball 2011, 2012, and I thought big things were coming from him as a Ranger. It never really panned out. There was a couple of good fantasy seasons mixed in. He went 20-10 and 20-9, but this, I think, is just a really hot run of BABIP. He's never even had a 300 BABIP in his career, and now he's 354. He's benefiting from being in the third spot in that order pretty consistently. I don't think it's going to sustain. I think this one, if you're in a trading league, you do what you can to get rid of Profar, because I just can't see it holding up. He looks very similar to the player that he always has been. I don't think that there's a drastic change that's now happened in his age 32 season. I'm going to be more of a skeptic here and say that this is probably not going to be able to sustain.
Yeah, and I'm mostly with you on that. Some points in Profar's favor. Contact percentage is up to 83%. It was 80 last year. Line drive percentage is 27%. I think usually averages right at 20 to 22. His average is around 21 or 22. But yeah, he's that's one thing that's in his favor, I would say. But it's weird to see a player leave Coors and do better. But that's Jurickson Profar.
Yeah, this is just whenever there's a late career breakout, I always tend to lean on the side of this is probably not legit. That lineup context does help him in terms of the counting stats, but he's got 8 home runs. I think on like 9 barrels. Maybe it's 8 barrels. It's just not something I think 9 barrels. I just can't really see this sustaining. Rob DiPietro saying third biggest increase in sprint speed.
Yeah, that's something.
It is something, and we've got 3 steals in the
first. He legs out more hits, perhaps. I don't know.
Bits of some swing training as well. That is totally possible. The sprint speed is interesting for me. There's more of a disconnect in my mind with sprint speed and with actual stealing bases. He's got 3 steals in 59 games. I don't know if he's going to be a burner. Like we've seen it with Wyatt Langford. Lots of speed doesn't translate to actual in-game results. So sometimes you see those guys who have like 50th percentile sprint speed who end up with 20 steals because they pick their spots or the team's more willing. I just can't really buy in. Like if you're in the league and you picked him up and nobody's really interested, then I'm totally fine to ride it out. He may end up being a drop. And I had this question a few weeks ago when we're doing like the last waiver runs of the season. Is Jurickson Profar going to be somebody that's available? Is he going to be sitting out on waivers, or is he still going to be somebody that's rostered come the middle of September? I'm not 100% sure that he will be. That's just my level of skepticism there. But he could have just really improved. It does happen. I'm just not really totally buying into it in the long run.
Yeah, he'd be the ultimate post hype sleeper if that were the case. But who knows? But this is definitely like a good career 2 months at the very least. We're going to talk about Maikel Garcia next, but before we do that, I'm going to share a quick note from our sponsors over at Sorare. Have you ever dreamed of stepping into the shoes of a general manager? Welcome to Sorare MLB, a groundbreaking fantasy baseball game where you call the shots. Take charge and make your managerial mark by collecting officially licensed digital player cards of your favorite MLB stars. These aren't just any cards. They're your ticket to compete for over $1 million in total cash rewards and other amazing prizes. Imagine winning VIP trips to the MLB All-Star Game or getting your hands on the unsigned merchandise from top MLB players. Here's how it works. Use your cards to set your lineup each game week. Real-world plays like hits, strikeouts, and homers will power your team's performance. Climb the leaderboards and snag weekly wins, from cash prizes to more cards and unforgettable experiences. But there's more. Build an iconic collection of your favorite teams and players to unlock gameplay bonuses and exclusive rewards. The rarer the card, the higher your score and the bigger your edge in competitions. And when you're ready to trade, the Sorare Marketplace offers a vibrant community of managers. Engage in live auctions, make instant buys, or trade cards peer-to-peer. Starting is absolutely free. Draft your first team of common cards today and feel the thrill of competition as you climb the ranks to baseball mastery. What are you waiting for? Join Sorare MLB today. Transform your passion for baseball into a quest for glory and get rewarded for your baseball savvy. Sign up today with the link in the description and get 50% off your first pro cards up to $50. It's your passion rewarded at Sorare. I did sign up for Sorare's the common cards. And one of the things they did when they first started the ad campaign, and I was able to get a very cheap Paul Skeens card there. So you can kind of get in on the ground floor for some of these players. It's kind of cool. I'm going to post a link in the forum so you can check it out yourself if you're interested, if you're streaming live with us. Next player we're going to talk about, though, is Maikel Garcia on the Kansas City Royals. So far this season, Maikel Garcia, who has short and third eligibility, which is so sweet, is hitting .261, but has 5 homers, 13 stolen bases, 34 RBI, and 32 runs. Now hitting leadoff for the team. Man, if you drafted Garcia, you're feeling pretty good about yourself, especially because so many third basemen have dropped by the wayside.
Yeah, he was one of those guys late in draft season that started getting pushed up boards quite a bit. There was some pieces that were going out around him. And it was funny because he started off, hot as hell, and then he cooled down substantially, and there was, victory lapping going one way and the other way. And now he settled in as a really, really good player. I don't think the RBIs are really sustainable. 34 ribbies in 55 games.
Well, not if he hits leadoff for sure. Yeah,
that's not going to stick. So I wouldn't try and extrapolate that. You're probably looking at maybe another 35 the rest of the way. But that's kind of the only gripe there. 299 BABIP, which is probably going to go up a little bit based on his speed and based on what he's done previously. Mm-hmm. You're probably looking at close to 30 steals, 10 homers in the leadoff spot in Kansas City, hitting ahead of Bobby Witt. You're going to get a lot of runs. So I really, really like Maikel Garcia. This is a nice little breakout, somebody that can probably be a nice piece of that core for years to come in Kansas City. Big fan of his.
Heading into today, 13 for 13 on the base pass. You got to like that. You love the reduced strikeout percentage down to 17% strikeout percentage there. And he hasn't lost that many walks, 6.4% walk percentage. That's not huge for a leadoff hitter, but hey, a high contact, guy that swings a lot, makes good contact. I'll take that, especially if he's hitting for any sort of decent average. I'd like to see him around 280 so he can really kind of power us there. But hey, beggars can't be choosers at that point in time. You're already getting a lot out of Garcia.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Next batter on our list of surprising breakout guys, Alec Bohm. Not that Alec Bohm we're surprised that he's good. Again, it's the extent that how good he's been. Hitting 308, 47 RBI, and I think that's what everybody focuses on. That's where he rates high in player raters. 2 stolen bases, 26 runs. But, just the hitting for average alone, I mean, that has a lot of value. And where league average is, the MLB league average is like 230 something. At best 240. When you're hitting 308 with a ton of at bats, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, he's hitting cleanup for what is probably at this point the best team in baseball. It's a debate, but I mean, it's hard to argue against the Phillies. The batting average has always been there for him. He's like a 280 career hitter, so it's not crazy to think he can have a career high of like a 300 to 310 type of batting average. The ribbies are probably not going to stick to this extent, but I think he's probably on course for 100 with maybe 15, 17 home runs. Really, really like him. I wouldn't be trying to sell higher or anything unless somebody's giving you, the farm for him and you're getting a first round player back or something, which you're not likely to be getting. I think this is one where you're just very happy that you landed on him, especially like you mentioned with the whole third base not being so deep this year. You get third, and depending on your format, you also get first base there as well. So a nice dual eligibility, great lineup. Just there's nothing not to like here. The strikeout rate has gone down. The walks are a little bit higher than usual. Everything is pretty positive, I think, for Alec Bohm.
Yeah, if the Phillies is kind of interesting. Different players have taken turns kind of powering their great start to the season. They had one little rough patch this past week where they lost a series in Colorado, lost the first 2 games in San Francisco, but they kind of cured it yesterday. It just seems like it's someone different. At one point it's the starting pitching. At one point it's Bohm and it's Brice and Stott. Then Harper heats up. Now Real Muto's finally warmed up a little bit there. They're doing this with Trey Turner out. Edmundo Sosa comes up and hits well in Turner's absence. Pretty awesome to see.
Everything has been incredible. Kyle Schwarber has been like a top 20 player. Like everything is kind of working for them. Like you said, they have these little turns. Like Bryson Stott had a really cold stretch and then he turned it on. The pitching has just been incredible. Another gem from Christopher Sanchez yesterday. Everything is really just operating at full speed. I think, what is it? They won 29 out of 35 games or something like that. It was just a ridiculous stretch. It was a Sarah Lang's tweet about the historic pace they were on for that stretch. Really, really crazy. I don't know if they're going to sustain that necessarily, but they're a 100-win team and they're going to be a competitive team in the World Series, in the playoffs for the World Series, I think, again.
Yeah, I think so too. Another team that's going to be likely in the playoffs and a contender for the World Series, although maybe harder to get there, is the Baltimore Orioles. Jordan Westburg is one of the pleasant, I wouldn't say, surprises, and surprises to the extent of how well he's hitting. But one of those good players that's really kind of fueled us. They have so many good young players. He struggled a little bit in his debut last year, and he's really turned it up this year, hitting 291, 351, 508, 8 homers, 5 stolen bases. Did get hit by a pitch on the hand the other day, missed Wednesday's game. Where are you on Jordan Westburg?
I was not expecting this. Pretty high prospect pedigree. With the whole Baltimore system, I figured there'd be a few hits and a few misses, but there's been a lot of hits so far with these guys coming up. I know it was a little rocky for Jackson Holiday, but so far their hit rate on these top prospects has been exceptional. Westburg, I do worry, like with this hand, I want to know what's going to happen going forward, but the x-rays were clean, so there's not really too much of a concern as of now. Again, if you just look at what he's doing, everything seems pretty sustainable. He's running a little bit of a high BABIP, but he always kind of has been a bit of a high BABIP guy. He's got decent speed. I think that there's a chance he ends up as a 2020 guy here going forward. Second, third eligible, just a lot to really like. He's bounced around he's bounced around the lineup, but he's in there pretty much every single day. A little bit nervous about this hand, but I don't think it's something that's going to bother me too much.
He's got that sweet middle corner eligibility that we like there, that you can put him at second, third, corner, middle. That's 4 spots there. That's so sweet when you need that sort of thing in your lineup. I love having that aspect for him there. A little bit worried that maybe he was running hot early, but I mean, at the same time, my goodness, I mean, what did we expect when we were drafting where we got him? We're almost there for dual eligibility next year too. He's at 17 games at second, 40 at third this season as well. That bodes well, especially because you know what? Holiday is going to make the team at some point in time, and he's going to be there for good. Kobe Mayo isn't that far behind. That's, he's hurt. Well, he is a little farther behind because he's hurt right now, but they've got those 2 guys coming up. So there's going to be some pressure to find ways to get all 3 of those guys in the lineup at some point in time. Obviously, you got Gunnar Henderson. It's not going anywhere there. This is a first world problem to have in the baseball world. They got to figure out room for all these guys. For right now, though, I mean, I wouldn't worry about it. But maybe in a keeper or dynasty league, I might be a little concerned.
Maybe, yeah. I do think that the Orioles need to trade a couple of these guys. Like I mentioned, like the hit rate's not going to be 100%. Not all of these guys are going to come up and be first-round fantasy players like they have been so far. Rutschman hit, Henderson, Westburg, Holiday eventually will. I think they need to trade, whether it's Mayo or Norby or whoever. I think they probably should start thinking about ways to capitalize on them because there's going to be nowhere to play them. And you can maybe get yourself another top-tier starting pitcher. They got Corbin Burns without really having to dish out any of those top-tier prospects. Maybe there's another top-tier pitcher at this year's deadline that they add and ship out a couple of those guys that there might not be room for.
Yeah, that's a possibility. I will say, free Connor Norby, except, Connor Norby's got a 30% strikeout percentage at AAA. that takes the bloom off his rose a little bit. And to your Burns comment, I agree. They didn't have to send any of their top ones, but I will say, they're getting some pretty good mileage right now out of Ortiz. I'm liking what I see out of Ortiz.
Oh yeah, I wrote him up the other day. He's been really good. He had a slow week and people kind of started dropping him a little bit, but yeah, another multi-eligible guy who's kind of just doing a little bit of everything for you. I'm pretty sure he's close to a 3-4-5 slash line. I might be wrong because I'm going off of memory there, so don't quote me. But he's been exceptional. He's been exceptional.
Yeah. There was a note in April saying that Westburg changed his stance a little bit, and that's one of the things that's really helped him. And he said that Gunnar Henderson's stance inspired that change. So, hey, players helping each other, rising tide lifts all boats, all that sort of stuff there. Pretty funny there. Hey, I saw the dynasty question in the chat. We'll hit any of those at the end here. Just kind of want to stay on point with the players that we've listed, but if you keep putting them in there, and we'll get to them at the end here. Joe and I will. So thanks for those questions. Everybody that's streaming live with us right now. We're going to get to our next player, but first, a quick note from our other sponsor, Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including my state, California, which, we don't have any online casinos here. So I can play Prize Picks. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. For instance, one of the things you can do, projected, I'm going to probably take a look at tonight, is I'm going to take a look at Luis Rengifo, a player we're going to be talking about later on today, getting more than 1.5 hits, runs, and RBI. So basically, a hit and a run will take care of it there. There's a lot of different ways you can get there, but I like his production so far. It's up against Carlos Rodon. That might be a little tricky for him, but I'm going to go with it nonetheless. You can get quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Make sure you can use the RotoWire picks tool like I did to help for that Rengifo pick. Hope it gets it right, but it's a great tool. I've used it a lot for baseball, football, basketball. Basketball is super popular on Prize Picks these days. And it's fantastic. Download the app today and use code ROTOPOD for first deposit match up to $100. That's promo code ROTOPOD for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. We're also on the Blue Wire Network. Here are the Blue Wire Network ads. All right. Thank you for that. For those of you who are listening on the podcast, thanks for those of you that are streaming live with us for that brief pause. I'm talking with Joe Orrico. He does the 90 Feet from Home podcast. Joe, where else can people find your work?
I also just recently started Patreon. You guys, it's also called 90 Feet from Home, just keeping things very simple. You can find that on my Twitter. And I'm also a writer and a producer over at Fantasy Pros, mostly producing stuff right now. But I will be on doing some more content as the year goes on as well. So you can check me out pretty much on my Twitter is where you can find all the links. I tweet out far too much stuff, but that's where you can get all of it.
Very good. Very good. We're kind of going through our, some top hitting surprises of the year. When we talked about Luis Rengifo, it was always about that sweet 4-position eligibility: second, third, short, outfield. We didn't mention his ability possibly to hit for average. He's hitting 343 right now, which is just pretty crazy. 4 homers, 17 RBI. RBI count pretty low. He's on the Angels after all. 12 stolen bases too, which helps you a lot on those player raters. Luis Rengifo is not going to hit 340, obviously, but is this someone you're thinking about buying?
I don't know if I want to buy him necessarily. We're only looking at 3 barrels through for his 4 home runs. He's got 3 barrels, so I don't know that we're going to see a lot of power. The speed has been pretty surprising. He stole 6 bases in 126 games last year, and it was the same thing in 2022, 6 over 127. So 12 in his first 39 is kind of surprising. Being in the Angels lineup doesn't really bode that well long-term for counting stats. I think if you have him, he's a safe hold / kind of like a soft sell. You see what people are willing to give you. If someone's going to overpay, then absolutely you take it. But he's not somebody that I'd be running out of my way to acquire right now.
Yeah, I kind of feel you on that one there. I love the eligibility, and I think Todd Zola did some research on that, talking about how much the position eligibility helps you. And a 10 or a 12, it's not as impactful, but like a 15-teamer or an AL only, oh my goodness, so useful.
Yeah, he's eligible everywhere, like pretty much everywhere except for first base, I think, at this point. At least on Yahoo, second, third, short, outfield. It's any day he'll have catcher now.
Yeah. Exactly. Bert Campaneris there. We can do that. But yeah, the problem is counting stats are always going to hurt with the Angels, with him and with our next player, Taylor Ward, who has been fantastic so far this year. But his production has slowed down in terms of counting stats since Mike Trout got hurt. Taylor Ward hitting 271, 11 homers, 34 RBI, 29 runs scored, 2 stolen bases. He led the American League in RBI at one point when Trout was rolling. Obviously, there's just the top of the lineup's not nearly as good when Trout is gone with Ward. Still, nonetheless, he's been a win for you so far.
Yeah, we're talking about barrels. He's hit 22 barrels already at this point of the season through 54 games. Last year, in his 97 games, that was pretty much the same number of barrels that he had. It was 23. So the power, and last year he was looking like he was turning things around as well. And then an Alec Manoah fastball kind of got in the way of his production. Oh my God, Alec Manoah, don't get me started. But Taylor Ward, I think, is pretty sustainable. Like the counting stats are never going to be great. Trout, I don't know if Trout's going to be back at some point, but who knows what he's going to look like. And even when Trout's there, I don't think it's enough to fully sustain the lineup. No Ohtani anymore. So runs and RBIs are going to be a little bit tricky there, but I think he is close to a 30 home run bat, especially if he keeps up these barrels. The speed is probably, maybe we get to 7 or 8 stolen bases, and he's probably in the 260 or 270 range. And to your point earlier, 270 is the new 300. So you'll absolutely take what he's given you across the board. I'd be more inclined to buy him. I think I buy the production more than I do Rengifo. But again, just in that lineup, I wouldn't be, especially for you guys who have like 3 outfielder leagues. He's definitely worthwhile as a starter, but I don't know if I'd be going out of my way to acquire him.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. I just think the counting the counting stats are going to suffer too. It's just the Angels, that whole collective weight sinks these guys a little bit there. I feel like sometimes, which is why, of course, we're talking about 2 Angels back to back here. Shame on me for picking it that way, but so be it. But he has been a solid addition for me. I wish I had a little bit more exposure to him. I have him in the main event. I also wish he'd be on a better team too. So maybe he gets traded at the deadline too. I can always hope. Dare to dream that impossible dream. Next hitter on our list, we're going to go ahead with Brice Turang on the Milwaukee Brewers. Got off to that massive start, and I think people kind of want to say, okay, quick start, that's it. I don't know if it's necessarily the case. I think there's something a little sustainable there. I think the running is certainly sustainable. 19 stolen bases so far in the season. You're not buying Brice Turang for the power, and that's fine though. But he scored 22 runs. He's hitting for average. Second base is hard to find good value. He has in many leagues, he has multi-position eligibility also at shortstop. Can I get you into this Brice Turang today?
Yeah, absolutely. I really like him. Again, I don't know if he's somebody that I really want to acquire unless I maybe have a speed deficit.
Mm-hmm.
There was a couple of games recently, like he had been hitting first consistently for the last, like pretty much the entire month of April. There's been a couple of games recently where he batted 9th. I didn't dig into the handedness of the pitcher. Maybe that played into it in some way, but I don't love that. If they do end up moving him down the order, that kills the buzz considerably for me.
Sure.
I do, because it already hasn't been great in terms of runs and RBIs. 22 runs through 51 games as predominantly a leadoff guy is not great, but that's kind of a big thing for me. I want to see where he is going forward in the lineup, but at this point, like the strikeout rate is good at 16%. He's walking at a solid clip. The OBP is solid enough where he should remain at the top of the order, and that's kind of a huge thing for me there. You're not getting a lot of power. It's pretty much speed and runs. Then you need him to bat first or second for that to really play out for you.
Absolutely. I'm looking at where he's batted in the last month. So he's had 14 games batting leadoff, and of those, they are all in the month of May. So, and they're all against right-handed pitchers. Against lefties, he's going to bat last probably, or he's going to sit. So there is that there is some risk of platoon. There's some platoon drop off there on the road a little bit. There are platoon drop off and also road drop off perhaps as well. Something to watch for a little bit there to see what happens with him. But again, if you're needing stolen bases, I mean, you're talking about an organization that has a green light. I think that's super important. And batting leadoff, I think that's also pretty handy too. I'm trying to think though, just double checking on like the stolen bases in the last lately. Yeah, 21 in the last 21 days, 5 stolen bases. We'll take that.
Yeah, I think he gets the 40. I think it's a good chance he gets the 40.
Yeah, I think so too. So okay, there you go, Brice Turang. Brent Rooker. He seems like a feast or famine sort of guy. We saw it last year, and we're seeing it again this year. 11 home runs so far this year. Hitting 281. I don't think that lasts, but I think the power is legit.
The power's legit. He's a guy that I would probably be looking to sell. That batting average is going to come back down substantially, I would say. I don't want to go too much into the BABIP part of it, but 382 is not going to last, not even close. I think he's probably like a 240-ish type of hitter. The lineup around him is obviously not great. It's a ballpark that's not going to let him play up his power as much as pretty much any other ballpark would, being in Oakland, which it didn't stop him from hitting 30 last year. And I think, again, just given the environment of baseball this season, if you need power, Brent Rooker is a pretty nice option. But I think that at this point, the impression of a lot of people is that he's really breaking out. And I don't know that I would necessarily say he's much different than last year. And if you just look at the projections rest of season, whether it's Steamer, Zips, ATC, any of them, he's pretty much projected to have about the same season with maybe a few more ribbies added on. I think you can probably capitalize on that high batting average and maybe get yourself something a little more sustainable for
Right.
Rooker if you are in a trading league. I think he's really good, but there's a few limitations around his fantasy game.
I'd agree, and I think team context also is going to work against him. I know the A's have been hitting much better than anticipated. I'm skeptical that it lasts. Again, another one of those, as the season progresses, I don't think the A's progress as well. Just the weight of losing so much is probably going to drag that down some. And I just, opportunity is there, but then again, they'll probably be looking over their shoulder a little bit to see who gets dealt too. Rooker's got 60 strikeouts and 182 plate appearances. That's something also that just portends a big slumps. And if you look at his last 21, it has been a little bit little disappointing, especially in terms of batting average. So something to watch for there as well. 62.5 contact percentage. Yeah, that's going to be a problem at some point in time, even if he does make great contact when he does make contact. And he's not going to leg out any hits either. You're just not going to get that very below average sprint speed too.
Yeah, that strikeout rate that was already very high last year, it's just a tick up even. And the batting average is just, I really don't trust that to sustain for very long. It's going to come, I think it already has started to come back, and it will probably, I think, settle in at the 240 range.
Absolutely. I listed Jeremy Peña here. Not that we're surprised he's a good player, but, had a big drop off from his rookie season last year, struggled even in the playoffs. And yet he's turned it around this year. If you look at what Peña has done so far, hitting 307, 5 homers, 21 RBI, 7 stolen bases. That's nice on a team that you don't necessarily look for stolen bases aside from Kyle Tucker. 33 runs scored too.
Yeah, right in the middle of the order. I don't think anybody necessarily saw this coming. Like, his rookie year was one of the best. If you look at the accolades, I think that we can remember, like CS and World Series MVP. I think he won the Gold Glove as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then last year he got to the point where he was dropped in most cases, and now he's back to being a top 50 player. I don't know that that's necessarily going to keep up. I like that the strikeout rate has progressively gone down every year in his career, from 24 to 20 to 16. Those are significant drops. I think he's pretty good, but I don't know that I trust him consistently on a week-to-week basis. Like, if you're in a head-to-head league, and you can't really do it like this. You can't plan it out. It's so tricky to predict, but
right.
I wouldn't expect great production every week. There will be times where Peña is not really doing a lot for you, and you're going to have to just stick with it and probably just trust that at the end of the year, you're still looking at what's likely maybe close to a 2020 season. Maybe he doesn't quite get 20 homers, but 15 and 20 with a 260 batting average or so in the middle of that lineup, and cleaning up in Houston. I know they haven't quite lived up to expectations this year, but that's mostly been on the pitching side. Their lineup is still generally, the typical Astros lineup that we can expect. So runs and RBI are pretty safe. I think overall it's a pretty safe player to be buying into right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. I like that. I mean, you want to see category juice, and the 7 stolen bases get you there. The power, we'll see about that. He had 10 last year, so 5 so far this year while hitting well. I wonder if he stops hitting for averages, he's not going to have the power to save you during those stretches. That's the kind of the downside. But then again, if power is down in baseball a little bit, well, then it doesn't hurt you as much. And that's the thing. I do have him in. I got him in a trade in the XFL where it's the league we draft in November at First Pitch Arizona, and it's a hybrid between dynasty and keeper. We go +3 every year for a player that you drafted in the minors, +5 if you got him in the auction. So I got him here on as a +3. So I'm loving this year. I'm just debating whether or not I should kind of sell it as peak or just keep writing it out like this is a long-term keeper. So that's the decision I need to make there.
How many keepers is it? It's like 15 or something?
15, and that includes all prospects. So say if you have a bunch of minor leaguers, then you have to make some tough calls. I do have a ton of minor leaguers to the point where I have no reserves really, but that's all right. I knew what this season was going to be like. And, a lot of that is accumulating volume on sometimes and trying to figure out, okay, can I be patient enough to find out what's going to stick? Unfortunately, a couple of my prospects then got hurt and had season-ending injuries or lengthy injuries, like Jordan Lawler. I'm like, I really need to be able to make a decision on him eventually down the road. Same with like Mauricio from the Mets as well. That was one that before the season even started, he was out, and tough to make a call on something like that.
It's been a tough year for prospects, but if Peña keeps up this pace, he'll make that decision about a keeper very easy for you.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm hoping he does, but we'll see. If he hits like 270, then we're kind of like in the gray area there. We got 2 more players on our list, and we'll take open questions otherwise. Next player on our list is the very, David Fry, who's like the top of a couple of people in the conversation here. Angela mentions that in the past week he's been writing David Fry. Of course you had it. He's in Coors Field. I bet you better have righted him there if you were going to write him anywhere. This is a man who has got a ridiculous BABIP, well over 400, but he's also got a ridiculous line drive rate right now, which is supporting that BABIP.
He's got a 208 WRC plus. He's been two players when he's been out there. It was wild because even at the beginning of this hot streak and even as it continued, he was playing like every other day. And I was thinking, why is he not just in the lineup every day with this kind of production you're getting? The eligibility is one of the most valuable, I think, in the entire player pool. Outfield, catcher, first base is pretty close. If you're playing NFL, I mean, a lot of shallower formats, Yahoo, ESPN, it's a 5-game threshold. He already has it, but he's 2 games away from getting first on NFBC, and he's appeared at third base 3 times, so a few more there. And we're going to be looking at literally the everyman here. Will he keep the production up? No, I don't think anybody expects this to continue. He's walked almost as much as he struck out this year. Almost 17% walk rate. It's like a Juan Soto type of stat line we're getting from him. And that kind of tells you what's going to happen. We're not going to see Juan Soto type numbers from David Fry here. Kind of a late bloomer getting to the bigs at age 27. I don't know that I would necessarily expect it to continue. But at the other hand of it is, who's going to be buying David Fry? If you're trying to sell him, I think those offers are going to be rejected out of hand unless you're being very, very, very conservative in them. And there's no reason to be. I think at this point you ride it out. He'll probably end up on waiver wires by the time the All-Star break comes around. But I think he's really good. Something I would caution, though, is that these numbers are going to be kind of inflated for a while. Even if he does run cold for a few weeks, he's a player you have to look at those week-to-week stats because, like you said, the 403 BABIP, 353 batting average. He's got an OPS of 1,100. Those numbers are going to be pretty good even after a couple of cold weeks, which we're probably going to be coming. So you might look at season-long stats in a few weeks and see, he's got an 850 OPS, but that might mean he's had a 400 OPS for the last week or so. So he's really somebody to evaluate on a week-to-week basis, in my opinion, but he's got to be in your lineups right now. He's pretty much universally rostered at this point, but he's got to be started everywhere at this point right now.
Yeah, I think so. And as the Bo Naylor manager in many leagues, just like I'm like that guy looking out the window. Oh, look at them all having fun with David Fry instead. Tough. And, the thing is, like, you don't want to carry 3 catchers, but you also, you don't want to get whipsaw. You don't want to cut Bo Naylor just as he gets hot and sees David Fry slump a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would imagine that Bo Naylor is the more valuable of the 2 rest of season, but I mean, no, that's one I'd be pretty confident in putting a few dollars on. I'd say is that Bo Naylor will be the more valuable catcher out there.
Yeah. I don't know at this point in time. I'd have a hard time with it there, but it's because the Guardians haven't been so committed to Naylor in the past too. Even like, the first 4 days of the season, he sat twice. It's like, oh, so this is where they're at here. So we'll see about that. But anyways, so I throw that out there. Maybe you'll see some interesting, some interesting situations there with some trade offers with David Fry, and maybe even some people are gonna, they're hoping to sell high on David Fry, and you may be able to swoop in and get a decent price for him still. But buy high on him. I think he's one of those guys where I don't think the cost will be that high because it came so far out of nowhere.
Yeah, that's a fair point too. Like you might be trying to sell him and maybe you get something, but you maybe can buy him for a pretty cheap price. It really depends on your league and knowing who the people are. If they pay very close attention, if you're talking, Tout Wars, Labor, those kind of, I don't know if the people who constantly look at fantasy baseball 24 hours a day are going to be buying into it pretty heavily, but I don't know. I think it really is league dependent there.
Yeah, that's right. So Test the waters if you need a catcher. That might as well try at least. Last player on our list is Matt Vierling for the Tigers. Boy, what a week he's had. Just keeps on hitting. Third base, outfield eligible. Vierling so far is hitting 289, 7 homers, 28 RBI, 22 runs. Doesn't run, or at least hasn't run yet. That's the one thing that might hold him back a little bit there. But what say you on Matt Vierling?
Oh, he broke my heart the other day watching that game against the Blue Jays, that marathon. I think it was at 14-11 where he hit the walk-off homer against Romano. He's somebody that I don't know that I trust necessarily in the long run. I think he's more of a short-term guy. I think he can be valuable in deeper leagues, but I think a lot of you guys, if you're in 10 and 12 team leagues with 3 outfielders, he might be kind of tricky. I think the batting average is pretty solid, but like you mentioned, he's not running at all, where in the past we've seen a few steals from him. It hasn't been a lot, but it's been a non-zero, where this season he hasn't even attempted a stolen base, which is not something you want to see. He's not walking as much as he has in the past. Not that he was ever a huge walk rate guy, but it's kind of disappeared down to almost nothing, below 5%. I think he's fine as a pickup, but he's not somebody I'd be trading for. That's where I stand on Matt Vierling.
Fair enough. Matt Imperez asks, in a 5 outfielder league, is Vierling an upgrade over Jock Peterson or Ryan O'Hearn?
In a daily league, I'd rather have O'Hearn there, where you can put him in when he's in the lineup, which is fairly consistent. I don't know if I would take him over either of those guys, honestly. Jock has been really good so far. I know he's kind of taken a step back recently, but he's still hitting over 300 for the season. Those guys are both really valuable in daily change leagues. Where if it's a weekly league, maybe Vierling, but Vierling doesn't play every single day either.
Yeah.
I think I would order them probably. I think it's probably Jock second. And then I think it's O'Hearn first and then Jock second for me. And then I put Vierling at the back of them, but it's fairly close, I guess. But I think I would just stick with who you got.
Yeah, I get it. I love Vierling's multi-position eligibility. That gives me a little bit of a reason to bump him up over those guys for me. But yeah, I think they're close enough that you don't. I think it's really close there. The problem is the chance of a whipsaw. Trying to get the hot hand is probably a bad idea. I love Jock against righties. Love O'Hearn against righties. That's the thing, and those are the most common things you face. Yeah, I think they're pretty much a toss-up, and you don't get a ballpark advantage with any of these guys really. Maybe O'Hearn against in home. Because he's a lefty, doesn't have to worry about Baltimore as much.
Yeah. I think those guys are a little more consistent, where with Vierling, like most of his production for the season has come over the past couple of weeks. And a lot of it came over, the games in Pittsburgh yesterday. And then what he did against Toronto, that's 4 of his 7 homers. He's got 13 of his 28 ribbies over the last 2 weeks. So yeah. I just think this is more of a hot streak than something that is more sustainable. And I think O'Hearn at this point specifically has kind of surprised all of us, because last year he was great, but I don't think anybody really bought into it. But he's just continued at that pace. He's batting 3rd for the Orioles. I think O'Hearn is for sure above, and then Peterson is probably a little bit closer. But even Peterson, I think I would probably still lean towards. But I don't think it's crazy to ride the hot hand either, right? If you're picking up Vierling right now, it's tricky to know when they're going to start, when they're going to end. But he's about as hot as anybody over the last week.
He's got him in terms of the counting stats so far. I looked up and like O'Hearn. Every time I've watched a lot of O's games, I'll be like, oh yeah, here he goes, hitting that sweet spot. 18 RBI, 19 runs. I would have expected a little bit more given the spot in the order, given that team. Batting up behind Rushman, who's on base all the time. You would think that he'd have more RBI than he does, but so be it. That is what it is. Let's take a few questions before we let you go here. Starting off, we had a dynasty question. E Will says, Dynasty Q, would you accept a trade where you give Ellie and Jason Dominguez for Paul Skeens, Ronald Acuna, and Spencer Strider in a productive struggle, so not worried about the playoff picture?
That's a huge haul. I mean, I know there's a lot to be concerned about, but I think you got to take it still. I mean, we don't know what Dominguez is going to be. I know he's had a couple good games in the majors, but I've heard that he might not even be in the majors this year once he comes back, because they don't have room for him. Long term, they'll figure that out, but we don't know what he's going to be. Ellie is a very hot and cold player where he ends up being very valuable, but it's probably going to come with a very low batting average, and the value will come from 85, 100 steals. I think that Skeens, Acuna, and Strider is an incredible haul, and it'd be pretty hard to say no to it.
Especially if you're not worried about this year.
Yeah.
I think I would do it too.
Yeah.
I think I would for sure. Good question though, because I mean, Ellie could be the 1.1,
Yeah.
or he could be hitting 230. I mean, there's so many range of outcomes with him.
Maybe even both. Maybe even both. If he's hitting 230 with 100 steals, maybe he does get to the 1.1
Yeah,
based
exactly.
on total value.
Exactly. A last question from Uncle Ted. What do y'all think of about Miguel Andujar in deep leagues?
I don't know. Again, it's the Oakland thing. I would have to be pretty deep, even just like a standard 15-team NFBC league. Maybe he gets bid on a little bit, but I can't see this being something that necessarily lasts. Maybe he's fine enough where you can put him in there in 15-teamers if you're struggling, but if you're putting in Miguel Andujar, I don't think the season's gone very well for you. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, maybe. But or you like, in the NFBC, you're like looking for playing time. I mean, he's clearly available.
Yeah.
Hasn't played yet. He's started, heading into today, it started 4 out of 5 games. You're like, oh, okay, maybe. That's, you're digging into the corners when you're digging into like Oakland and some of the other, I would say Colorado, but Colorado, obviously you're trying to pay attention to playing time there. But okay, Colorado pitchers. Okay, that's a similar analogy there. But anyhow, I could see it because of the past pedigree, but I also wonder like how quickly is it till his body breaks again too. And I think that seems pretty likely given that it started the year broken. Yeah. There's probably something there for stretches, and that's about it. He's like some of these other, when you said earlier, like, okay, you caught him in the middle of his hot streak, probably not likely to continue. I feel like Andujar is that sort of guy there.
Yeah, he's hitting 400 through his first 15 at bats. If people are just looking at that, it's appealing, but I mean, it's 15 at bats, right?
Exactly. Joe, we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you everybody for coming on board. Thank you everybody for joining us in the live stream, those who jumped in here. Joe, once again, tell everybody where they can find you.
I appreciate you having me on, Jeff. It's always great getting to talk with you, especially 2 consecutive days. That's a heck of a treat for me. But you can check me out over on Twitter at Orrico99. Anything that I put out, podcasts, articles, or anything there, you can check it out. Orrico99. And then wherever you get your podcasts, 90 Feet From Home, fantasy baseball show, where there's actually my pinned tweet right now is the show I did with Jeff yesterday. So go check that one out. And it's a fairly new show. So help me out by hitting the subscribe button if you would be so kind.
Absolutely. Hit that subscribe, hit that like, give him feedback. Make sure to check that out and check out Joe's Patreon when you get a chance too. All right, everybody. Thanks everybody for listening. We got the 2-step starters tomorrow with Todd and Clay. Thanks for listening to RotoWire.